All right, welcome everybody. This is our second webinar outlining the restaurant and bar toolkit developed for LISC on behalf of Uber Eats and Visa, who have sponsored this program as well as this engagement. And I'm from an organization called StreetSense. We are a team of food and beverage consultants, designers, graphic designers, marketing experts, as well as interior architects who all do work in the hospitality industry. My team in particular are the Eat and Drink team, and we're a team of specialized food and beverage consultants made up of former operators, owners, and restaurateurs. Myself, I operated a restaurant for about 10 years, about 25 units, about $40 million in revenue across 5 different states. And since have been working at StreetSense to run the Eat and Drink team, of which Gina works with us. Just to give you a little outline of what we're going over today, we're going to be reviewing some additional revenue streams that restaurants and bars can tap into as revenue has depleted over COVID and people's habits have changed. These are ways that other businesses have adapted to the pandemic and coming out of it to build their revenues, to build back their revenues, and to think about their businesses in different ways to be able to capitalize on new revenue streams by making small changes and trying to generate larger results. We're big proponents of incremental change here, and we want to talk about small things that you can do today to get started, to get in the habit to ideate, create, and then generate new revenue streams. So these will be examples that hopefully spark some ideas for yourself and your own business. We do have a small activity planned, but since this is a recorded webinar, we'll keep that relatively brief, and Gina and I will walk through some activities that we have done with other businesses to be able to help actualize some revenue streams and operationalize them quickly with what we had on hand. And we also are joined by Karen from Uber Eats, who's going to walk us through some of their platform's ability to help capitalize on some of these revenue streams. So without further ado, I'll turn things over to Gina to start to walk us through some of the additional revenue stream ideas that we have collected for you in our toolkit and that we'll walk through in brief today.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. As Alex mentioned, the last couple of years have been quite bizarre for everyone, for every industry, and especially the bar and restaurant industry. It's required thinking outside of the box, thinking on our feet, pivoting, and really just capitalizing on what we do best, which is thinking on the fly and doing things authentically and from the heart. So a lot of the examples that we're going to go through may seem, well, there's 2 ends of the spectrum. Some of them may seem pretty straightforward and obvious, but it's just a matter of putting one foot forward in front of the other and doing it, making it happen. And some of them may seem more daunting than they actually really are. The overall message that we hope that people take from this is experiment, get creative, get out there, figure out what you're already doing. Don't add extra work to your plate. We all are far too busy for that. But figure out what is really why your customers continue to come back to you and how can you expand upon that. So I'll the next couple slides, we'll just go through some examples. I will give, when we've actually seen restaurants doing that, I will refer to them. And I'll also just talk about some of the ideas that we've been seeing. We did a quite extensive countrywide search and research. We got to visit quite a few of these places and see these things in action and see how people were not only surviving, but really thriving through the last couple years. If you recall markets, the market idea was one of the first things that came out of the pandemic, really when grocery stores were running low in so many essential items that the consumer needed. Restaurants really stepped up and served as grocery stores to their guests. They had access from their wholesalers to things as simple as paper towels or bulk rice that they started selling directly to consumers. We're still seeing a bit of that, maybe not as much, but there are a really good way to get people into your business, perhaps during hours where you're not necessarily serving food. So if you are a dinner only restaurant and you are already having some of these items getting delivered during the day, there's no reason why you can't have a little stand set up right inside the front of your restaurant where you're also selling this to the neighborhood and getting people to come in your doors, see what's inside, essentially will get people thinking about you more often and hopefully bringing them back for when you are doing your dinner service. Taking that concept one small step further are what we call the deli style grab and go offerings. These are things you're probably already making. So if you do a chicken salad sandwich, why not package that chicken salad in a deli container and sell it? We've seen quite a few people get the little refrigerated shelves right by their point of sale system and being able to offer that in different sizes. So if someone's coming in to buy lunch, they pick up something later, something similar that you offer for dinner. That's something you're already making. You already have deli cups in your store. So again, it's just kind of putting it together and selling it. The beauty of some of these more experiential ideas is that you can play around. If play around with pricing, play around with sizing, play around with how much you make each day until you really find what works for you. Shelf stable items are really the win-win for everyone. So if you make a flavored salt that you already use for some of your dishes, why not just put it in a jar and try to sell it? And if it doesn't sell, no harm, no foul, you'll end up using it. But again, it's just kind of experimenting and seeing, like, you'll be surprised at what people might just pick up as they're walking out of the store to use later. So all of these ideas are easily executable. You could start it tomorrow, really, if it's things you're already making. Of course, you can always take it a step further. There's the examples of some of you on the East Coast may be familiar with the Kava chain. They've taken it to the extreme. They started making their hummuses and their tzatziki's and everything for their fast casual concept, and then started selling them just from their stores. Ended up working with Whole Foods. They're now in, I believe, all the Whole Foods nationwide, and they do have their own production center now. But the point of the story is they started in their store, in their own kitchens when their kitchens were dark, just putting the stuff in deli cups, and now it has kind of flourished into its own revenue generator for the company as a whole. Continuing on to subscriptions, another kind of outside the box, but could be a simple enough idea. We started to see a lot of restaurants wanting to figure out how could they get money on their books that was guaranteed, especially during the pandemic when so much was not guaranteed. So we started to see a monthly delivery service. Roses at Home is what you'll see the example on the right side of the page. Roses is a fine dining restaurant in DC, and they started offering a delivery service, or if you were outside of delivery, you could pick it up, but people would have to commit for 3 months. So the guests could either elect to receive 1, 2, 3, or even 4 meals per month for a minimum of 3 months. That way, money was already on the books for the restaurant. The guests were really excited to get some good food that perhaps they didn't have access to even before the pandemic. It's a small restaurant. It's hard to get a reservation at, but they now were able to get this great food delivered to them. And it's been quite successful. They've continued it on for the last couple years, even now that dining is open again, because so many people were enjoying having access to this food at home. But also they were playing around and sometimes offering things that weren't necessarily offered in the dining portion of the restaurant. If you dined in, you might not have access to some of these meals that they were doing on their deliveries. So there was that aspect of it as well. That's very similar to a membership perk. Again, we've kind of always seen memberships in other industries. So why not in restaurants, right? It's a small monthly fee that gets people access to, again, either early access to reservations or behind the scenes tours of, sitting inside the kitchen with the chef when you come for your reservation. Just little things that non-members don't have access to. And it's also been something that a lot of restaurants that we spoke to said was working, even if the fee was pretty small, they found little perks to do. So you'll see the next item I mentioned, one-off theme nights. That's something that could be offered only to members. Let's say you typically are not open for Sunday brunch, but on the last Sunday of the month, you decide to do a brunch every last Sunday. Maybe you change the theme. Maybe it's a Southern brunch one month. It's a seafood brunch the next. That could either be offered only to your members, or it could be offered to anyone in the community, but just kind of getting you thinking one-offs, doesn't have to be on your normal menu. It can be as frequent or as infrequent as you want it to be. It can be experimenting with things that you've always wanted to try. But it's just a way to get people thinking differently of your establishment and getting money coming in differently as well. To that same idea is some type of lifestyle curation. So we all know dining out, there's a certain ambiance in the restaurant that you don't get when you're making the food at home. So restaurants tried to get creative and say, how do we recreate our restaurant for people who are getting a lot more delivery? Um, they came up with fun things. So creating playlists, whether that be as simple as when people got their to-go food, there was a whole list of music that they recommended that you listen to while you were either eating your food or cooking it at home for yourself. That went along with scents. There were scented oils that smelled like the restaurant. Things got a little creative, but it's fun. And it's, again, making a person feel like they're recreating a little bit of that magic that restaurants have. And like I said, whether they were just getting delivery as is from your restaurant, they could still kind of feel like there was a piece of the restaurant there with them through the playlist, or taking it all the way to the whole kit and caboodle, where of course there's always been private chef offerings, but we started seeing private chefs not just coming with their knives and with their food, but coming with the dishes from the restaurant, the linens from the restaurant, the centerpieces from the restaurant, and really recreating the entire restaurant in people's homes. In some cases, they even brought staff with them for a really high end experience. And if that was something that was maybe too much to offer from the chef's side, a lot of them started doing very detailed step-by-step assembly of their dishes. So typically when we think of delivery or takeout, the dishes are already composed. But one way that people kind of made a fun interactive experience out of it was giving the guests the items decomposed and then teaching them either through a list to do on their own, or offering for someone to come to their home and teach them how to make these dishes. So again, there's this component of recreating the magic of restaurants, getting creative with it. So you would call this, I guess, a mini class, helping your guests at home figure out how to make some of the dishes that you might be so well known for. Again, either through writing it, or for that extra perk, having someone come there and assemble it with them step by step has been fun for restaurants. And again, something different. It opens up a whole new revenue stream, because you're not taking up any room in your restaurant. You're going to them. So it's been successful for quite a few places that we spoke to that were doing things this way. Alex, did I forget anything on that page?
No, I think you covered it. And I think a large portion of our activity will sort of be dedicated to fleshing out how a business like some of the ones that you guys run can actualize some of these and combine some of these different ideas to formulate something new and creative. And we hope that it's sparking ideas for you as we go, because all of these examples are just one way that folks have exercised some of these ideas, but oftentimes combining them in different ways can be a unique way that your restaurant can stand out and really offer something new that guests are after in an innovative way.
That's actually a great segue. We have a section here dedicated to partnerships, but what I'll say specifically about partnerships is it could really be applied to any of the ideas that we're talking about. It's really about establishing what you offer, and looking at complementary services that you might need to complete your whole offering, and then also looking at what others are doing, what they can help you with. So a personal example, my husband really likes a cheesesteak place by us, and as much as I like the cheesesteaks, I do not want to be eating cheesesteak several times a week. That's just not, not good for me. They paired with the salad place across the street. I suspect they probably get a certain amount of pre-made salads from them every evening. So we only order directly from the cheesesteak place. But now I can order salads when my husband's ordering the cheesesteak. So something as simple as that, they don't even offer salads on their sit down menu. But because they noticed a lot of husbands were coming in and being like, oh, I got to go across the street to get my wife's meal, they were like, let's just make it easier for the customer, combine forces here, and offer this for delivery. That's a very similar thing to, and luckily now with Uber Eats, it's easier to be able to combine places. And Karen may talk about that. But I guess what we're looking at also is if there's a place that has a very established delivery operation already, and perhaps you guys don't do as much, talk about tagging on with them or at least learning from them. We found more than anything when we were talking to restaurants, they really just wanted a community to speak with other restaurants, especially during this time, and figure out best practices and what was working and how people were pivoting to survive. So I think if we've learned anything from the research we've done, it's that restaurants are willing to help other restaurants, especially if there's something that you can offer that they don't. So, talking to those restaurants that already have quite a robust delivery program and figuring out if you can get in with them on some of their deliveries, on their drivers, and figuring out, again, how to use different platforms perhaps together. And like I said, Uber Eats can help us with that. It's really about getting creative and helping each other out and offering something that perhaps your neighbor doesn't offer and coming together to make you guys better. Kind of to that same idea, and many of you may have heard the phrase ghost kitchens. They're also sometimes known as mysterious or dark or shadow kitchens, because that's really the whole idea of them is that it's a little unknown. Typically, they are delivery only kitchens, and people don't know where they're coming from. They're almost like they're new restaurants, but you can only get them oftentimes on the Uber Eats platform. There was a restaurant in Maryland that was dinner only, pretty fancy, um, and wasn't the most buzzy. It had been around for a while and people knew it was there, but wasn't super busy. They started doing wings only, so chicken wings, very different than their traditional offered menu. Lunchtime only, and actually only on certain days. And they only offered it through Uber Eats. And I'm not just saying that because Uber Eats is a sponsor of it, but it was one of the stories I came across on my own. And they actually have done quite well. I think the concept might even be called Ghost Wings, and that's all they offer are chicken wings during the times of day that they decide that they want to offer it and what works for them. They have a empty kitchen sitting there. They're using their same labor, their same equipment that they already have. So why not try to get a little extra cash flow from this new idea? So not only does it utilize some of the kitchen space, but it also kind of gets to get your staff and your chef kind of thinking differently, making something that they've always perhaps wanted to try. There's something with the word ghost or pop up that people are a little bit more forgiving, and they realize it's a bit of an experiment. So the example on the right is Louis at Real. This served a little bit more as a mini kitchen, and the differentiation between a mini kitchen and a ghost kitchen are really the mini kitchen is branding is key. So this fine dining was a dinner only restaurant, and the chef had always just wanted to make fried chicken. He wanted to perfect what he thought was the perfect fried chicken sandwich. So he started opening just serving fried chicken out of their kitchen at lunch. It did allow walk-ups. So there's a little bit of a difference between the ghost kitchen and the mini kitchen. It was branded completely separately. It's called Louis. And like I said before, it really just gets people thinking about your restaurant top of mind. It's kind of good for PR. It's up to you if you want to run its own separate social media account, or if you want to kind of keep it really grassroots and word of mouth. But again, it allows for utilization of your resources, and experimentation, which can kind of be fun and an unexpected boost in sales.
Yeah, and one thing to touch on there is the concept of brand equity and thinking about, it's very hard oftentimes to change a menu when people are familiar with it and understand what you offer and are very, very connected to it. And that's oftentimes why people get customers returning and coming back, because they become familiar with something. What concepts like these allow you to do is really sort of do an offshoot with separate branding, with a separate identity, but build off of that brand equity without jeopardizing it. Meaning, you can have a fine dining restaurant or a high-end sit down or a nice upscale casual or even a quick casual that serves one type of cuisine, but offer something independent of that may not at first glance feel connected, but because it comes from a different identity but still connected back to your main brand, you have the equity of what you were doing before, but without the restriction of having to upset anybody by having something off menu, or having to remove or adjust your menu for it to be operationally feasible. We highly recommend doing this during off-peak times because it allows you to use shoulder periods and shoulder revenue, as Gina mentioned, when you're thinking about things like dinner or lunch, whatever your primary meal periods are, even breakfast. Doing something in one of those off periods allows you to experiment a little bit, try out new things, try new items, and see how things resonate when you present yourself a little bit differently than you have traditionally in the past.
And again, along those lines, we've kind of talked about the concept, but the idea of space sharing. So perhaps you actually don't want to run a ghost kitchen out of your kitchen, but you still have kitchen hours that it's sitting there and could be used by someone else. So it's worth it to look into partnering up to share your space. It helps split operational considerations. Again, it allows for that frequent experimentation, as Alex mentioned. And then there's also the idea of, if you've been considering expanding into a new neighborhood or a new area where you don't have a brick and mortar, you could talk to someone in that area that you're looking at in that market and see if you could do some type of ghost kitchening or pop-ups from out of their space to test out that neighborhood. And then also kind of the same idea with deliveries. So perhaps you don't typically deliver to a particular area, it's outside of your range. You could consider doing what we've called neighborhood drops. So a pizza place that's based in Baltimore, which is about an hour from me. So I'm not going up to Baltimore on a normal Tuesday night. They bring their pizzas to a specific neighborhood every Tuesday. They do encourage people to pre-order. With something like pizzas, it's easy enough to bring some extras for those people who bring along some friends. And we know that they're going to be there on Tuesdays, and we're going to order this. And it's closer to us, so we don't have to make the hour drive up to Baltimore, and we get this fabulous pizza. They actually do it as frequently as once a week. But again, this is up to you. When you want to do these things, maybe it's once a month you want to go into a different neighborhood. Maybe you are space sharing with a restaurant in the neighborhood so you can use their kitchen and prepare things closer to the neighborhood that you want to drop off. Maybe you're partnering with someone else to do the drops, so it's more than one restaurant going to this neighborhood that you're typically not at. A lot of these concepts blend together, and that's the point. Like we mentioned at first, it's really about just getting creative and thinking outside of the box. So there's the space sharing idea, but then there's also the delivery sharing idea. And so I kind of talked about those together. But one of the examples that we spotlighted in the space sharing ideas was a place called Keep in Touch. They call it KIT for short. And they really do want their customers to keep in touch. So they're continuously changing. There is their breakfast by day and then a bar by night. And that concept in itself is not that novel, except for the fact that this is run by two completely separate companies. They share the space, but just like you would have a shift change for an all-day restaurant, they have a shift change, but it is actually changing the whole operation of who works there, where the money's going, and all of that. In addition, there is some type of something that ties them together. So the two ties are, they both like to use local products. and they are both minority owned. So there's some type of thread of connection between the two separate companies that are using this space. And they also utilize their shelves to sell local products. They like to change their local products and have people showcase other minority owned and other local products. So there's some type of, I guess, continuity, even though a lot of the operational things are kept separate. So just an idea. We actually went there, and my friend that lived in the neighborhood, and she said she was there the month previous, and they had completely different offerings to go. So she was excited to try what they had had that current month. Go back up, Alex. So one of the things, kind of to touch on that, we've always understood the idea of limited time offers for dining restaurants. That's the idea of specials, but you could also do that for deliveries. Maybe you offer something that's only available via delivery. We've seen places actually physically cut out windows of their establishment. So it used to be only sit down dining, but then they were like, hey, we're doing a lot more to go. So make it easy for the customers. They don't even have to come inside and cut out a walk-up window. And then finally, when we're thinking kind of atypical things, different day parts. So with the world changing, not only not as many people working 9 to 5, but a lot more people working remotely, they're eating different times a day. So we've seen places add things such as afternoon tea times. We've seen places take things away. There's a pretty popular restaurant in New York called Dame. It is only open Monday through Friday. They reserve Saturdays and Sundays for a private event only. Monday through Friday, dinner only, and Mondays are walk-in only. So it does create a little bit of exclusivity. It's a hard reservation to get because they're not open a ton. They only open their reservation system 3 weeks in advance. But they do keep Mondays for the walk-ins, and so people want to go on Mondays too. So they are creating some type of demand based on what works for them. It also allows them to provide a different quality of life for their employees without being open as many hours. They can offer, especially management, a 5-day work week, which is sometimes very unheard of in this industry. So it's really about, again, thinking outside of the box and looking at your own demand, what's working for you, and capitalizing on what's working for you.
Yeah, I think similar to being more flexible, consumers have also become more forgiving insofar as they don't expect the same demands that they had before with their previous work lives, when your restaurant or concept had to be open exactly where they were, exactly where you were, all at the same time for peak periods like lunch, dinner, weekdays or weekends. I think people have now, gotten in the habit of verifying and checking that places are indeed open when they need and want them to be. And I think people are expecting, some change in how things are being served and serviced based on people's change in behavior. So as Gina mentioned, it's really smart to make demand-based decisions as well as not operate when you're not generating enough revenue to pay the bills. Sometimes it can be better to take a small hit in top line revenue to try and bolster your peak period performance versus trying to stretch and extend and be open in times when you're otherwise not profitable.
And then here we have a couple of other examples. I did touch on the Kava success with selling their dips and sauces. I touched on Shook with the neighborhood deliveries. They actually have a schedule of 20 different neighborhoods that they go to, and it's rotating. And the neighborhoods have come to know which day is their day of the month, and place their orders far in advance. And then they're just going out and delivering further away from their brick and mortar. I mentioned Dames as far as the day part, and then the lifestyle curation. And this is more for home, but hopefully it gets your brain going and thinking of how you could help recreate something like this for your customers. But even Barilla Pasta is getting in on some of this flexible and creating this atmosphere that maybe they once didn't, by creating playlists that are timed to the exact length of when you need to cook your pasta. So if you're doing something like that for your people who are doing takeout and they're assembling their own meals with your food, you could certainly do something fun like that and say, you know, you need to saute this during the whole time that this song is playing. Something like that, just to kind of make it more personalized and stand out from the so many places that are doing delivery and takeout these days.
Great, thanks, Gina. So as we said, we're going to walk through a bit of a interactive activity. Gina and I are going to go through and sort of on the fly generate some ideas around some businesses that we used to operate, to really kind of think about how to actualize a large consortium of these ideas, to really think about how to apply different lenses to think about how to generate different revenues in different situations. So what we encourage everybody to do is to really start small and think about things that are executable. Think about things that can be done with what you have already on hand or close by, that leverage existing relationships, that give you something to talk about that's interesting for your social media and your clients and customers. But really thinking about how you can start small to really build big and get in the habit of thinking outside the box and doing new things and engaging with your customers. When you become known for doing new and interesting things, it becomes a bit immaterial what those new and interesting things are, because people start to gravitate towards you because you have something to say and because you have something new to offer without jeopardizing the core of your business. And so as I mentioned before, I used to operate a chain of restaurants. A lot of those were delis. And so our bread and butter was lunchtime and sandwiches. And so we have all the core components. We made everything in-house. We made everything from a scratch kitchen. And during the pandemic, I helped a friend of mine set up a way to be able to kind of monetize some of the things that we had already going on in the store, combine with an additional partner to be able to offer something new and unique, as well as do a little bit of subscription and lifestyle curation. So what we kind of brainstormed and thought up is, you know, we have a ton of extra bread. We don't have the demand that we had prior. Demand became very unpredictable. And so we were thinking about what items we could make with our bread. We already used our leftover bread for breadcrumbs, for making croutons, for doing things in house. You know, it's a one-day shelf life product. We got it fresh every day. It was the backbone of our business, but we were buying too much of it on some days because there just wasn't enough demand as typical. So we thought about what products first and foremost could we use that leveraged our bread. And so we started making crostini, which have a significantly more shelf life and are more shelf stable than the bread itself. They stay crispy and crustier longer. We also use some of our refrigerated product, which we had ready access to, that we bought in bulk at very favorable prices, that we bought at high quality, and really broke down larger pieces of cheese to be able to offer alongside that crostini. And then we partnered with a local wine merchant to be able to provide a charcuterie night. And so it was an offering that otherwise we wouldn't have the ability to execute, but we had all of the components on hand and we're prepping already daily, slicing prosciutto, slicing salami, capicola, other items that we could make a charcuterie board out of. And the investment that it required was relatively minimal. Now, we already had a cryovac machine because of the way that we managed our own prep, and breaking down some of these items required that. And so it was something that we were already had access to, but it could have been done with other packaging formats as well. So what we did was we kind of thought the charcuterie offering was good in and of itself, but we didn't kind of anticipate someone just logging onto our site and thinking about how to just come up and order some charcuterie. That we didn't see that as too compelling of an offering or too diverse from what you could already get from a grocery store or from a high scale retailer of the kind. And so we were trying to think about how can we make it a bit more interesting. And so we approached a neighbor of ours who was a wine shop. And what we wanted to do was think about how do we co-brand something that gives it more brand equity and really thinks about how to turn something that would be, multiple trips and multiple places, that when you're not going out quite as much or aren't, working right next to where you shop, as many people are not anymore in working from home, how can we create a more compelling sell? And so we partnered with the wine company to curate a selection of two wines, a red and a white. And we curated the cheese, the crostini, and the meats, and we co-branded it. So we would brand our own products. We each made a sticker that was co-branded with our own branding, and then we designed a bag together to go with it. And then if I could do it all over again, I think the icing on the cake would have been also creating a playlist around it too. I think it would be a really nice ad to be able to sell something that felt like a curated evening out, as much as providing interest in new product together and combining forces and buying into each other's brand equity that could be sold out of both places as a co-branded product that required relatively minimal intervention and could be very quickly and easily packed together to sell something that was brought to you by the courtesy partner. Had we been a little bit smarter, it could have been something that we did as a subscription box or something that we delivered on a regular basis. And so it may have been something that, had we seen some success with, we would have transitioned into doing more of a subscription style service, or something that you could potentially choose your wines and then be provided with the rest of the componentry through our service. And so we were thinking about how to continually monetize and actualize that. And so something like that is an example of just taking things you have on hand, developing a little bit of new collateral around it to really brand it and think about how to do a lot with just a little. It really required in this instance, a stamped bag that was different than our traditional one at either location. It required us securing a little bit of inventory in both locations to be able to stock each other's shelves with some of the core goods. But otherwise was things we already all had access to and were able to just sticker and brand and then co-market as well on both social media and on our own ordering websites. And indeed, different kinds of customers were viewing these things, whereby you had a wine consumer who was thinking about something quite different than you had from a lunch or dinner consumer that was typically ordering from our deli, both having equal access to these things that hopefully were able to bolster the sales of both.
So Alex, it sounds like those were available both in store for grabbing the bag and go, as well as on your online ordering platforms.
Yeah, and we did it as a limited time offering only. So it was only available during select day parts and day periods. And so it wasn't something that we had available all of the time. So it wasn't hindering the overall operations of things, but it was something that we had during evenings that typically people don't think of a deli as an evening kind of establishment or restaurant. And also it was available for delivery.
Yeah, it could also be great for so many places started doing outdoor movies during this time where so much had to be moved outdoors. So a quick even partnership with one of those parks could also have expanded your footprint there.
Yeah, definitely. And in the past, we had a lot of success with that kind of lifestyle catering, where we were doing things like apartment lease ups, doing things like outdoor activations in lifestyle centers, both in suburban town centers and more urban areas. And it's something that could translate really well as an offering that is untraditional to the establishment itself, but still leans on the brand equity. We use quality ingredients, we use fresh bread, we use fresh cheese, and really kind of highlight some of the components that I think work really well of our concept, but maybe somewhat behind the scenes and are typically, sort of consumed as just an assembled sandwich that we've created for you, but aren't often seen in their individual components, which I think this did a good job of giving us a new way to talk about our ingredients as well, which was something we were looking forward to.
That sounds good. I'm going to go get one of those.
Great. So at this point, we wanted to turn things over to Karen from Uber Eats, who will introduce herself a little bit more, who's going to talk about some of the capabilities of their platform to be able to add on additional revenue streams, to be able to realize some of these ideas that we've been discussing today.
Great. Thanks, Alex and Gina. Hi, everyone. My name is Karen. I work at Uber Eats within our merchant experience team, and I focus specifically on alcohol delivery for restaurants. So I spend my day thinking about how we can better empower restaurants to grow their revenue with us through alcohol delivery. So this is really apt that we're talking about finding additional revenue streams as a result of COVID, because the reason why Uber really wanted to venture into alcohol delivery for restaurants was because of COVID. COVID kind of changed the buying behavior of a lot of our consumers, where consumers became more accustomed to and are even seeking to buy takeout alcohol from restaurants. So we want to create an opportunity for restaurants to capitalize on that revenue on the Uber Eats platform and really grow their business with us. And so we've spent a lot of time building up our technology to make sure that we can allow restaurants to deliver alcohol on our platform safely, compliantly, making sure we have things like ID checks and all of that, so that all restaurants need to focus on is adding the alcohol to their menu, and kind of seeing the benefits from that. So now we're live in about 16 states for restaurants to deliver alcohol with us. And we're continuously working on adding new states as local legislation gets passed that kind of enable platforms like Uber to deliver alcohol for restaurants. And there are a few reasons why you should sign up, right? So I've listed a few of them here, but the big one, like I mentioned, is that you can help meet your customers' demand. Restaurants can more closely recreate the ideal dining experience by putting alcohol on their menu. And I think we've seen that customers respond really positively to having that option on their menu when they're kind of just browsing a restaurant on Uber Eats. The second is that it helps grow revenue. So alcohol is typically the most profitable item on a given menu in store for a restaurant, but we also see that translate to the Uber Eats platform. We see that baskets that have alcohol in them are about 40% higher than baskets without. So it's almost a no-brainer that you should add alcohol to your menu and kind of give eaters the opportunity to add that to your basket, because it just grows your revenue instantaneously. And then lastly, within the Uber Eats app or Uber Eats ecosystem, adding alcohol can increase your visibility. We are often doing alcohol-specific marketing, in-app advertising, promotions, etc., that your restaurant could tap into by offering alcohol on their menu. And it kind of increases exposure, not just on your alcohol items, but on your overall restaurant. And there are a few ways that you can, craft your alcohol menu so that it optimizes the experience for eaters and kind of attracts eaters to your platform. And so a few creative ways that I've seen restaurants do this is, so first, just adding a curated list of a variety of alcohol types. So wine, beer, cocktails to go, depending on your local legislation, could all be added to your Uber Eats menu. And, obviously your Uber Eats menu, different from an in-store menu, can't be a whole page of 50 different bottles of wine because people are kind of scrolling. But if you put your 5 top selling bottles of wine on your menu, that could be a really good way to direct eaters to your most profitable or your favorite, most popular items on your menu. The second thing that we've seen restaurants do really creatively with alcohol is that they create bundles for optimal pairings. So things like brunch boxes where someone can pick a brunch entree that then comes with a mimosa kit of like an orange juice and a bottle of sparkling wine, or tacos with a pitcher of margaritas, burgers with beer, or like a date night bundle of 2 pasta dishes and a bottle of red wine. Those types of things kind of get eaters excited about recreating that in a restaurant experience at home, especially as people are now becoming more accustomed to just like dining at home and having that almost like full service restaurant experience in their own homes. And then lastly, depending on the state that you're in, you could also include alcohol in restaurant promotions. So like things like buy one, get one happy hour deals, or discounted alcohol at certain times of day, things like that could really help drive traction to your alcohol menu. So how do you sign up? So you could email restaurants@uber.com to sign up to deliver alcohol or to join Uber in general if you're not already on the platform. Or if you are on the platform, you can sign up via your Uber Eats Manager portal. Yeah, so I'm happy to answer any questions about that later as well.
Cool. Thanks, Karen. Yeah, and we've seen a lot of businesses really lean into this, and not as something as a temporary fix as it began, but as a way, as you mentioned, that's really addressing how diners' behavior is changing, both as people are more and more often eating at home, but also as they're thinking about restaurants as providing a different kind of service than they did before, and not just thinking about the in-restaurant experience, but thinking about how that translates to other things that they do. So I think this has been a really great way. I did have one question for you regarding laws and regulations. Do you guys help your merchants navigate and understand some of the specific requirements for the local regulations, and making sure that they're doing things above board, and walk them through how to make sure that they're sort of doing things the right way, and offering only when they're allowed to do so by jurisdiction.
Yeah, so we have a lot of internal processes that like make sure that, you know, menus are compliant and we're following all the rules to protect restaurants from just, you know, any potential issues that might arise when it comes to alcohol delivery, because it's a highly regulated space. And we also make sure that our salespeople and our account managers are kind of equipped with the local legislations and kind of all that granularity, so they can talk to merchants about these types of things. I think something that I want to note is that at the end of the day, the restaurant is the holder of the liquor license. And so while we do want to give guidance to restaurants, I would also encourage restaurants to kind of check if they're unsure about anything or want to double check on anything with their local liquor control board, just so that, you know, we're kind of covering all of our bases.
Great. And do you see this as a program that's going to continue to expand to more states as more states continue to enact these things?
Yes, definitely. We've seen a lot of states become more favorable towards things like alcohol delivery. I think, you know, during COVID, a lot of states and cities passed temporary legislation that allowed for takeout alcohol. And we're seeing more and more of that be extended or be codified into permanent law. And so I think that's something that we're going to continue seeing expanding.
Great. Yeah, let's hope that they continue to allow for things that work for restaurants and work for consumers. And you know, I think a lot of us out there have been advocating for this actually for quite a long time, and it's been really great to see that the world didn't end when restaurants were allowed to operate as restaurants operate in their stores as delivery restaurants. So
yeah, exactly.
It's good to see. Well, we appreciate it, Karen. Thank you so much for walking us through that. It's always helpful to have someone who has additional insight and information to what other restaurants in the area are doing. And indeed, when Uber platform allows you to do so, it's a pretty good bet that you can take a look at your local regulations to make sure you're compliant, and then get going on moving that. As we mentioned, this is one of those ideas that really leverages things you already are doing and already have, but also is ripe for some of the creative inputs that Karen mentioned, and that Gina and I discussed, where you can really get creative with how you're bundling alcohol together with your food, and how you're curating experiences for people at home, which I think is a new way that people are expecting restaurants to be able to service their needs. So that is all we have. But we really want to just sort of recap exactly what we hope people take away from this webinar, which is to really think about the ideas that were presented here, review the toolkit that we have issued and submit, and we'll resend out to all of the businesses to be able to think through how different things apply. That toolkit has a ton of links to other businesses that are doing interesting things, as well as resources to be able to actualize a lot of these things. And covers a lot of additional topics that hopefully help restaurants be able to continue to innovate and think about how to bring not just new revenue, but new customers to the fore. You know, really thinking about how to evaluate your current business demands, the resources, the needs, the desires of your consumers. And again, experiment a little bit to test those things out, and don't just give up on something because it didn't work immediately, but try something new. And all of this is fodder for us to be able to talk about what it is we're doing as businesses, which is sometimes just as important as the revenue generated from it itself. You know, then kind of really lock in on an additional revenue stream and think about how to come up with a plan to execute it. Consider utilizing the available platforms from Uber Eats when appropriate, whether it's alcohol or some of the other services they provide through their courier system that can hopefully help you bring something to consumers where they are, as much as you have to execute in your own store. And then really constantly just analyze and adjust as needed. You know, don't try to eat the elephant and get into national wholesale distribution of retail chains on one retail product, but really think about how you can bring things to your consumers in ways they're already ordering from you, and then build upon that success as you get better and better at packaging things, selling things, doing things differently, and creating brands to be able to execute your concept, and really thinking about how to maximize the space, the physical space you have available to you, as well as the digital space and the digital currency that people really think about when they're ordering from you through platforms like Uber Eats.
The only thing I'll add, Alex, is if there are questions, we are happy to answer offline. As Alex mentioned, there is quite a large toolkit. This is actually one of 7 different topics that we dive into in the toolkit, and also one of a couple more webinars that are left on other topics. So we're here, we're accessible, we're available. We uncovered a lot of hopefully very useful information that we want to share and continue to see the entire industry thrive through not only the pandemic, but all of the things that we might face in the coming years, whether it be legislation or any of those things. I think we found that by connecting with other restaurateurs, there's still a lot out there for us.
Great. Thanks, Gina. Thanks, Karen. And thanks everybody for joining. And we'll see you on the next one.